Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. We're doing a very fun, practical, but I hope also very expansive conversation on a topic that I feel like is always on someone's mind somewhere, which is what do we need to consider when we're changing our jobs? So, before we get into why we're here today, I just wanted to welcome everyone who's here. And as we let people transition throughout their day from other meetings and sort, just to share a few agreements that we often hold in space when we do our authenticity amplified conversations. So there are two really simple ones. The first one's really just to encourage all of us to stay curious, right? I want you to know that when you come into this space, what Orlinda and I are sharing today are just two different perspectives, right? It's not preaching one right way or wrong way to do things, but we really want to provide you with choices and options so that you can make your own informed decision as well. And in order to actually help encourage the curiosity in space, something that we found really helpful is if you hear something that really resonated with you during this talk today, to leave it as a comment. So if anyone's coming by to listen later on, they get to see what are the gems that could be helpful and that might draw them in to listen to the rest of the conversation and support them in their process also. And the second thing is just to stay open, right? Things we talk about here on the series is they're part of a much larger journey. Like when we say changing jobs, sure, it sounds like one task, but there's so many different considerations underneath that as well. So just stay open to what your journey can look like. And hopefully we get to support you along the way during that as well. All right. So if you're still coming in, welcome. Feel free to leave any questions or thoughts in the process, but let's kick it off. Orlinda, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Would you be able to give everyone a quick introduction about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Orlando Cortez. I'm a money coach for women of color, and I help them build a life that they've never seen their family experience. So,
Mm.
that little dream, that little lifestyle, that's something that you can't stop thinking about. I want to help you get there. A little bit about me. I'm the eldest daughter. I moved from Guatemala when I was 10 years old. Um, and I was undocumented until the age of 21. So when I say like
Hmm.
anything is possible, anything is possible.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today. It's really such a treat. I love money coaches, especially money coaches who support women of color, because growing up, I don't remember anyone teaching me how to handle my money, how to think about my money. But
Mhm.
it's just such an important part of, yeah, finding our independence and finding our freedom as well, and creating a resource that not just uplifts ourselves, but uplifts the community that we surround ourselves with as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a little bit about me for those of you who are new to me. My name is Betty Chan, and I am an authenticity life coach. I identify as a first generation daughter of immigrants, hailing from Chinese and Burmese background. So, yeah, authenticity is a whole word and a whole journey in and of itself that I really
Mhm.
wanted to support folks in, because that's been something I've had to go through. Specifically, I work with folks who I would say identify as code switchers. Or a simpler way to think about it is, do you feel like you're someone who has to have different identities in different rooms in order to just show up as you are? Right. And it feels really hard to just feel like you can only be one version of yourself for fear of how people think about you, or just, not being able to get the opportunities that you need to. So the work I do and support people in authenticity coaching is helping them take off those pieces of armor that we've had to learn to wear to protect ourselves over time, especially as we move through our 20s and 30s, and just help us find gentler ways to show up as ourselves and find that strength and courage to do so, knowing that no one can take that away from us. Yeah.
So good.
Yes. So you might be wondering, okay, what's a Latina money coach and an authenticity life coach doing together talking about this topic? When Orlinda and I talked offline, we found that we often support our clients in a particular scenario, which is like, how do we change our jobs, right? Sometimes it's how do we do it? Do I leave? Do I stay? So the question can take a few forms. And I would say just maybe like to help clarify a little bit, the way we think about changing jobs, it could be for a variety of reasons, right? The reality of today is sometimes it's not our choice. Sometimes we go through layoffs and that choice is made for us. I've also worked with clients who feel like they've reached the limit in terms of their career journey. They've moved up the ladder and the opportunities have just kind of stopped at a certain point, even though your desire to grow and your ability to grow continues. And the third one is just, it's not always a bad reason why we need to change our jobs. Sometimes we just want to change in scenery. Like we as humans evolve over time. So it makes sense that the things that we get excited about doing, the things we're good at doing, also changes over time as well. So that's what we mean by changing jobs. But I'd love to just dive right in, Arlinda. Like, regardless of the situation of how people do it, I think the first instinct people have is that like, oh, if I'm gonna have to change my job, it's gonna be hella hard, right? It's a whole hurdle in and of itself. And I'm kind of curious, like, what have you seen to be some of the common challenges?
Oh man, I know that there's a desire, like you were mentioning, whether it's a choice or not a choice.
Mm,
And then being there and just feeling like you're underwater and you keep treading and treading water. And it's like, I
mm,
don't want that. If that has ever happened to you in the past or anything that you have
mhm,
experienced, you're like, I don't want that. But how can I make it through? Through that. So I see that a lot. And sometimes we haven't seen that be possible within our circle. And so we think
mm.
it's not possible for us. So I'm so excited to like dive in and continue to talk about this because it is possible for you. And yeah, we're going to be mentioning those things.
Yeah. And you're right on the modeling part, right? Like, I don't think I ever saw my dad change his job, right? So it's like growing up with the people around you where it's like, yes, I have one job and I'm only allowed one job. I don't think they say it that way, but it starts to feel that way. And it feels like that's the only option for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the only option. And I just went through a layoff in
Mm,
November. And so financially, I was getting ready
mhm,
for possible layoff. And I was getting ready with that, but emotionally, there was so much that came up that I wasn't
mm,
ready for
mhm,
about 6 months. And so sometimes we
mhm.
get ourselves ready to leave a job financially, then we get there and we're like, "Oh my god, there's a whole other section that I didn't know was going to happen." Did that ever happen to you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you brought that up because, yes, the title is How Do We Plan for the Costs of Changing Jobs?
Mhm.
And the thing we really want to expand in today's conversation, the financial costs are very important things to consider. But exactly what you said, Orlinda, like the emotional costs that come with it, the social costs that come with it. There's just so many different forms that I didn't I didn't premeditatedly wow, I sound like I'm about to commit murder. I didn't learn to think about it in advance, right? So I remember the first time I left a job, it was kind of like an F it situation. I was so burned out, so tired, so frustrated that I decided to leave. And it was really funny because 3 to f no, roughly 5 years after that departure, I was getting ready to leave again, and it was only then I realized the
Mm.
whole time of those 5 years telling myself, "Oh, I made that choice to leave that organization," only to realize, like, no, that choice was made for me because the environment around me was so toxic and so straining that I had no other choice but to get out in order to survive. So, it
Mhm.
sounds dramatic, but workplaces do tend not tend to, but there are some workplaces that can lead to that sort of heavy weight and impact on us as humans as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that's the hardest part when you're, like, not ready, but it just happens.
Mhm,
And then it can also trigger things that you saw growing up, and you're like, "Oh my god, I don't want to feel that emotion." And
mhm,
so, if we're thinking about, like, "Can I leave this job? Can I not leave this job?" And if we lead with fear, we're always going to be left with, I cannot. I cannot. And
Mhm.
then you're going to resent that of like, but I want to, like, but
Yeah.
you're never going to be happy in that job. So what is the feeling that you're feeling? Like, why do you want to leave your job? And kind of
Mm.
making like a pros and cons of like, what does it mean? What do I need? How can I
Mhm.
support myself to kind of start that process and get curious about the idea?
Mhm.
Um, and like you said, when you started this conversation is like fun, like a fun topic. I don't think that we ever put like fun into like conversations like this because
Mm.
it just feels so stressful.
Yeah.
If we don't
Feels
know what's on,
dreadful.
yeah, if
Mhm.
we don't know what's on the other side, it's like, I'm not going to do it. And sometimes I'm like that. I'm like, oh, if I don't know what's on the other side, I don't know. But how could we get you to kind of like create that safety for yourself?
Yeah. It's what I call like feeling safe in the unknown, right? Because we are, especially in the workplace, we're conditioned to always have answers, which is great. You look like an expert, but if you slow down and think about them, like no one has all the
Mhm.
answers, right? So like someone somewhere always is facing some sort of unknown, but how do we want to show up in that? Exactly, you said. Do we want to show up from a place of fear? Like I'm afraid to take this leap, which is
Mhm.
okay. Like we don't want to make that feel like that's not something you're supposed to feel. We all feel terrified at the edge of our comfort zone, right? Like every day this is happening to us, and it's perfectly okay. But like giving the space to name that and then to look closer, like what is that fear telling me? What's underneath that fear? And I love what you pointed out, which is what is that thing that excites me, that makes me want to leap to the other side? So a way that I've described my what led me to leaving my most recent role full time before I became a coach. I use the terms accelerators and brakes. Right. So it's similar to like a pro con list, but just like a slightly different way of thinking about it of like what was pushing me out, what felt like a break right now. I couldn't keep going in this workplace. And of course, it was the burnout that was
Mhm.
hitting the ceiling of opportunity as well. But if I left just for that, it does feel like someone else is driving my car and like leading my life forward. So I really had to like look and figure out what were some of the accelerators that I really wanted in my life. What do I want more? What are the things that pull me forward that feels like literally like my chest wants to like lean forward at that point? And that was just like more room for creativity, flexibility with my time, autonomy with my decisions. And yeah, that just felt so exciting that it made the scaries feel less scary. Like I'm curious if that's what you felt too.
Yes, and you know what I loved? I kept smiling really big while you were saying that, because in the words that you were saying it isn't the words I use, but I'm seeing like, okay, at the kind of like what is driving us, it's around like the same thing. The way I call it is like my fun why. Like, what is it that I
Mhm.
really want to do? Okay, like in my finances, let's say if I pay debt, like what would that allow me to do? If I left my job, what would that allow me
Mhm.
to do? And
Mhm.
then that gets me more curious and steers me away from like the fear. Because if I hang out in the fear, as an anxious girly, like I am going to hang out in this anxious bubble. But what is like my fun why? What do I want my life to look
Mhm.
like? And I get to create that right
Mhm.
now, which I really love when you share the way that you start your mornings, which when I was in my 9 to 5, I was not starting my mornings by reading, by pouring into my cup first. It was
Mhm.
waking up and going straight to my
Check
desk
my
and,
phone.
yeah, and
Yeah.
doing all of that. So what would be your fun why, or as Betty's mentioning, your accelerator of like the reason of why do you want to leave your job?
Mhm. Mhm. And if you have a big dream around it, great. But I
Mhm,
often find that, like, with a lot of the folks I work with, it's been such a long time since they've dreamed of something new that it's like a muscle that's hard to use at this point. So I'll be honest, when I left, the that got me excited is not having to check my phone first thing in the morning, is giving myself the permission to sleep in till 9 a.m., as you now know, has sometimes stretched to 12 p.m.
Mhm.
And that's perfectly okay because I've now created a life that allows that flexibility
Mhm.
to in my day, like that I can start later, and I still get to do all the things that I need to do.
Yeah. Slowing
Mhm.
it down. I think that as the eldest daughter and immigrant also, it's always been about like checking off all the boxes. So if you're out there and you're like, I'm checking everything off. I'm doing everything right, but I'm just not fulfilled. I am just like burnt out. I am tired. I hear you. It is tiring. And at 32, I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, go, go, go. I have built the life that I have now. And it's like, when do I get to enjoy it? So if you're in that area
Mhm.
also, is you built so much. When do you get to enjoy just your company, yourself, your loved ones, your
Yeah.
pets? So it can also look like that where you just want to stop everything and just like slow everything down and
Mhm.
not being like after and after. And it doesn't mean forever. It just means what if you want to give yourself 6 months? What if you're doing a career pivot and it's before you jump into that, you take some time for yourself and you do that? So there is no one way to do it, and there's no wrong way to do it. Like you really decide what that time looks like for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that, and sometimes looking at, like, our what we tend to complain about is a really great place to start discovering what we truly want. Because the examples you gave made me immediately think, like, yeah, I one of my top complaints used to be, "I don't have time for seeing my friends. I don't have time to eat. I don't have time to go to the bathroom," basic human needs, right? So just even realizing and like listening to yourself or asking your trust ones around you to reflect to you or coach if you're working with a
Yeah.
coach, like what are the things I tend to complain about in my current circumstance? Are those things I can get excited about if I change my jobs? And it doesn't mean
Mm.
to take the path that we've done, which is do a complete career pivot. But you can also just slightly change like your work status or even the role that you have in a company. But sometimes even just a little shift can make that room that you really need to let more of those joys and wants and desires into your life again.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the kind of wanted to move into like the challenges that we face
Yeah.
to get there. It is sometimes thinking that we don't have choices because we're leading with like what we currently have.
Hmm.
But what I want to say is like you can create opportunities for yourself. Perhaps in like the time that you're in right now, it just doesn't feel like it's a tangible thing to do. But if you start before, I mean, you can't really say, "Oh, I'm gonna, get burnt out in August," right? So I'm gonna start right now. But if you're able to, like, just starting to kind of think about the fun why and start planning for it.
Hmm.
You how can you create opportunities for yourself?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no cost to
Yeah.
daydreaming. There's no cost to
Yeah.
having a dream. There's no cost to just exploring your fun why. If anything, it just empowers you to have the clarity and the idea and a starting point of like, how do I turn this into a reality for myself? But you're
Mhm.
right, there are the challenges that stop us, right? Because the thing that feels hard is like, I remember at that time for me and thinking back for my clients, like, there's not even that permission we give ourselves to start daydreaming, to start thinking about it. And there are some of I'd love to hear, like, if there are other thoughts that you've heard, from your work as well, or even in your own journey. But one of them that I hear is, like, I don't wanna let the people around me down, right?
Mhm.
Because especially I feel like for first gen folks, right? Like, we grew up in a collective environment, in a collective culture, so the choices we make are not just for ourselves, and if we do we start to feel a little selfish about it, right? We always try to consider the impact it has on our parents, on our siblings, on our partners, on our kids, etc. So that's one thing that comes up a lot. And sometimes I call it like the overgrown size of that really is when no one's actually saying those things to us, but it's the narrative that runs in our head. Like, you can't do this, this is not for you. You can't make this change. Are you crazy? Things like that. That when you actually stop and check, I'm like, oh, wait, no one's actually saying this to me, but I'm so afraid everyone's going to say it that I'm the full stop. I'm not even going to daydream about what's possible. I'm just going to put my head down and keep doing what I'm doing, even if it makes me
Yeah.
miserable.
Yeah. It's that expectation to go up the ladder and always get promotions and always like going up.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting that you say that sometimes nobody's saying that, but it's already in our heads.
Yeah.
Because when I got laid off and I knew I was going to go full time in my coaching business, I made the phone call to my mom. I think, yeah, it
Mhm.
was my mom. And I wanted to break the news that I had gotten laid off.
Mm.
And, what I led with was, "Hey, I have something to tell you," because I was excited for my layoff. It really, to me, was like the universe saying, "Orlinda, like, it's time for
Mhm.
you to go into this path." And I called my mom and I said, "Hey, I have something to tell you, but, can you please not be sad for me?" Like, that's what I was leading with. And I was like, "I got laid off and I'm gonna go full-time on my business." And
Mm.
the thing is that my sister had gone through a layoff, but it was really hard for her. And so when we think
Mhm.
about layoffs, it could be a very difficult time, but for me, it was, very different. And so
Mhm.
nobody was saying that to me, but I kind of felt like I had to say that,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
really interesting that I was leading with that. And I think it is that expectation of, "Oh, you're not gonna go up the corporate ladder?" Or, "Oh," because it's
Mm.
usually what we tend to see.
Oh, so it feels like a loss, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're not doing that climb. That must be a loss for you.
Yeah.
When for some folks, the reality is climbing the ladder actually leads to more misery. Does
Mm,
not always lead to more
yeah.
happiness, more freedom, and more time.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I had to check myself just now too, because when you mentioned layoff, my instinct, my face was like, "Oh," like it was like a a sudden worry, because you're right,
Mhm.
that is a general narrative, but it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be that way. Like, if you're clear on your fun why, like you said, it could be
Yeah,
an adventure.
yeah. It could
Mhm.
be an adventure,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, let's say the folks who are watching us today are considering, "Okay, like, I'm starting to daydream. I get it, Orlando, Betty. I'm gonna give myself some permission to think about my fun why." What would you recommend them as a starting place?
Ooh, that's a fun why. Okay. What is something that you have not been able to do while you've been in your 9 to 5 to start creating like this fun why? What is something that you haven't been able to stop um, thinking about? What is something that maybe it's on your Pinterest board? And it doesn't have to be anything that makes you a great blank. You, it's
Mhm,
just lately I've been using the word just like exist. Like,
mm,
when do we just get to exist? It's like before you're 16 years old, because some people start working at 16 years old.
yeah.
So before then, you just get to exist, right? And then after
Mm.
retirement, then you just get to exist. But what about that? I know.
Such a long time in between.
Like, when do we just get to pause and do the fun things that you want to do?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be monetized.
Mhm,
Just something for yourself. Simple as coloring, simple as gardening, simple. Like, what is that for you?
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
That could
and emphasis on simple. Sometimes it
be.
is just cracking open the window and spending more time
Mhm.
outside. Things that have always been at our fingertips, but because the hustle and grind is such a formidable monster that, like, we keep getting distracted by it. We keep pulling our eyes back to it as opposed to the things that we want. Mm.
The thing that I felt a lot of during my 9 to 5 was like working from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, and
Mm,
then using the time afterwards to recharge. It was like I would
mm,
deplete myself and then it was like recharging. And sometimes that would be like, okay, I have to get fed. And then I have like maybe I need a nap. But I never thought of things like filling up my cup. It was like recharge. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
to, like, get
nothing.
back to baseline,
Yeah,
right?
yes, to
Mhm,
baseline, and it's like, okay, and
mm,
now, when you think about, like, okay, your baseline, what can you do above that, that it's not, like, just to recharge and nurture yourself, like, back to health?
mhm, yeah. I remember doing that, like, just, like, go, 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 push, push, push until I can plug myself into the wall, so to say. I didn't do that until the weekend, but what all that ended up looking was me sleeping in, like,
Yeah.
trying to do some catch up sleep. I was so tired that all I could do was binge watch TV or doom scroll, which doesn't actually refill our cup. I mean, it's fun for a short time, but it doesn't actually get us above that baseline like we're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and I think a part of that is like I credit that to being a prideful sufferer for a really long time. I
Mhm.
usually describe like my old version of myself as like an expert sufferer, someone who can just like really buckle down, bite down, and just like keep
Yeah.
going. And it's something that I take pride in my boxing and has helped me in my boxing. But when it comes to the work context, it just led me to burnout and another burnout and another burnout after. And kind of like what you mentioned, like we're not recharging with excess. So like the next time I burn out, I'm already starting at a little less than
Yes.
100%. And then I
Yeah.
burn out again, I'm starting at an even little less.
Yeah.
And what I remember that happening, and I see it in my clients too, is just like where we start to like kick ourselves. It's like, oh, I can't believe I just wasted my whole weekend just sleeping it away. And this resentment starts to build for the week. And I started to hate Mondays before anything bad happens. Like, it's just like I made Monday into my enemy at that point.
Yeah. Wait, I'm curious as you're mentioning this, when you were going into your full-time coaching
Mhm.
business, what was your drive, your accelerator that you were mentioning?
Yeah. It was similar to what you said. Like, it was to do more of what I loved. Um, how do I put this? I used to say a phrase in like, you can be good at what you do, but it isn't necessarily good for you. And I
Mm,
felt like that was my experience in project management. I was really good at it, but it didn't feed me back, right? It was a very invisible role. It was a role that, unfortunately, at the organizations I worked with, everyone thought they knew the right way to do project management, except for the head of project management, which I'm like, why did you hire me in that case?
mhm,
So there's this feeling that like I was really crunched in, and granted some of it was my own mindset, right? Like part of it was circumstances, part of it was just like I didn't feel like I could stretch my expertise anymore. I didn't feel like I could do things my way
mhm,
without asking every team member, every manager, every client that I was working with to make sure all the pieces lined up for everyone. So it became just a very restrictive type of feeling. And I'm a very naturally creative person and I am a late owl. I never really worked well in the 9 to 5 schedule.
mhm.
So just having to crush my little creative soul into that really fixed structure was kind of stealing my confidence away. Like I started to question like can I make any decisions on my own because I'm so used to having all decisions run by everybody in order to green light it.
Yeah, so really starts, like, within, of,
Mhm.
like, the things that you kinda wanna break and do things differently. But something that stood out to me as you were saying that was, I've never been able to work, like, the 9 to 5 schedule, and to me, in my br I'm a Virgo, so, like, I'm like, "Okay, 9 to 5, I have to go," and, like, list and checklist is, like, my thing, and so when I went into full-time entrepreneurship, I was like, okay, I need to create a schedule for myself and I need to have kind of like a 9 to 5, even if it's like a 9 to 2. And then I started to find that I'm like, I can't. And I feel like I'm sitting here trying
Mhm.
to work and I just can't. I want to be outside. And
Mhm.
then I switched that to like, okay, let me fill up my cup. And then I'm like rolling into my desk and changing those hours. And sometimes your next move doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, it could
Mhm.
be a next career move. Some roles are okay with you just getting like, okay, we're hiring you to get the work done, not to be sitting at your desk 9 to 5.
Mhm.
So, really stepping back and allowing yourself to take that time to find a role that really aligns with you so that you can do the things that you want to do in the morning and then work at the times that you are the most energetic or that,
Mhm.
you know, can sit. And it's like, okay, now my brain is working and all of those things. But I love
Yeah.
that everything that you shared kind of like also starts within. Or like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
It's kind of like a mirror. What do I want to
Mhm.
work on? And
Yeah. And the approach is generally just like work smarter, not harder, right? Like we
Mhm.
didn't come here to dream of labor. I don't think any of us here on this call is dreaming of labor. So work is usually a tool for us to get to the other things we want. And how do we be smarter about how that tool works for us as well? Yeah.
Yeah, as a tool. I don't think I in the beginning I saw it that way. And I don't think a lot of the times my clients when they start their
Mhm.
money journey think about money like as a tool. It's just like we're trying to fix everything and kind of going in the hamster wheel. And it's you're right. It's like
Mhm.
something like how could we use money as a tool to get us to where we want to go and the things we want to accomplish and things. So that's such
Yeah.
a good nugget.
Yeah. And
Mm.
this conversation is reminding me also, like, oftentimes the first questions that I even had this too, but my clients also had it is, well, what do I need to plan for? Say we're ready to make that jump. And there are tangible things that I think is really important. I think having a financial cushion, like I don't generally advise, and I'm curious as a money coach, so like it can be very like unless the role, okay, I don't want to say this extremely, if the role is hazardous to your health or physical self, yes, make that jump, make that transition because you deserve at least a baseline healthy environment to be in. But generally, we want to leave having some sort of financial cushion, right? So that when we land on the other side, it's a little easier. So those are the things we think about, or like insurance, etc. But the things that I find that folks don't often consider as costs is just like if you continue to stay, what is that opportunity cost? Meaning exactly what we talked about. What is that? Where else can you be putting your time? Right. So that could either be career focused, like you could be at another organization that values your particular skill set a lot more highly and know how to like leverage it as part of a team, or even just like, hey, I'm in a season in my life right now where I really want to be present with certain family members, whether it's young kids, ailing parents, etc. And just being able to have that flexible hour and take time off and just work less than 40 hours a week and be present as well. So thinking about the opportunity costs as well. And I'm kind of curious, Arlinda, like in addition to financial costs, what are the other costs that your clients have to consider when before they make this change?
Ooh, one of them, that comes up is or often my clients don't think about, but we're like, "Oh, okay, how does this look like?" Is therapy sessions. If you're, like, going to therapy before and it's like we're thinking about cutting costs because we're thinking about making this move, and it's like, "Okay, how can we support you?" That could be, like, therapy sessions or if you're taking classes at your gym, you really like your bar classes. Okay,
Mhm.
all of that really fills up like who you are, how to function, how to like make things easier for you. So if you know like some things are just a non-negotiable. So having a
Mhm.
non-negotiable list of like, I really, really need this, then it is something to always consider of like, okay, this is something that I need to pin and make a priority. So having a non-negotiable
Mhm.
list, and what is that for you? And it doesn't have to make sense to other people. I think that you keep saying that also in this conversation
Yeah.
of like listening to so many people, right?
Mhm.
Because what is important to you, Betty, might not be as important to me, but what's important to me might not be. So everybody's different. And
Yeah.
there's no like right or wrong. So having like a non-negotiable list of what that looks like,
Mhm.
so that you can always have in mind, okay, when I make this transition, I need to allocate or plan for this thing that is important to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you make a non-negotiable list for yourself, it's not from a place of trying to be rigid, like all or nothing. Like, I have to have everything on this
Mhm.
list, or like I will say no all the time. But try to think of the non-negotiable list as like a set of conditions for satisfaction, right? Because having that list of things, one empowers you to ask for the things you need to show up as a whole person every single time. And
Mhm.
also, it's the best way to say yes to yourself. It's like, yes, I deserve to be outside. Yes, I am someone who will still be a responsible person if I wake up at noon every day, right? What are the different ways you can say yes to yourself? Exactly like what you mentioned, as a counter to all the demands of the voices
Mhm.
in our head, sometimes really outside of our head, but also inside our head of like, well, you need status, you need to have you need to have a title of a certain caliber, you need to have a salary that's got 5 zeros after it, right? Like, are those things that actually matter? Are those ways that you actually say yes to yourself, or are they someone else's yeses?
Yeah, it's leading with that like abundance and positivity
Mhm,
versus like negative. And it's like, oh no, I have to cut back when I do that. And so we come from this mindset of restriction and like anything, I don't know, to me it's like anything restrictive is like I want to do. And it's like, oh, you know, but coming from like yes, when you get to say yes to yourself and coming from like in an abundance
mhm,
place.
mhm. Yeah. So having that non-negotiable list, great place to start. And we said if you
Yeah.
don't know what goes on it, look back at your complaints. That's a fun way
Mm,
to identify like what were those things that feel really like
wow.
it comes from a place of deprivation for me, and how do I like fill my cup again with the things
Mhm.
that make me who I am. Um, can you share a bit, especially from a money perspective, of like how do we budget for this then?
Yeah. I like to think about first kind of assessing what you are already spending on. How much do you need to sustain your current lifestyle?
Mm,
And then kind of like ask yourself, what is important to you in your list that you want to keep? And some of the things that it's like, oh, maybe that's not as important to me. And in this season of your life, you want to prioritize other things, but really
mhm,
assessing the current situation.
mm,
Because as we're thinking about making this move, like Betty was mentioning, we want to be as prepared as possible. Unless you can no longer be at this job because you're, mental health or anything.
mm,
And it's like you can no longer wait, but we want to get you as prepared as possible. And we can't do that unless we assess the current financial situation that you're
mhm,
in. So really assessing what you are, what's going on right now. And
mhm.
two is how can we start planning for it and adding a budget? So you have your number, let's say to sustain your life is like 2000, right?
Mhm,
How could we start saving towards 3 months or 6 months that you want to be off and allowing yourself to do that and
mhm,
putting it into the budget to get you there? But that's really going to help you build the safety that you want in order to make that next
yeah,
step.
yeah, definitely. I remember thinking, like, it takes the pressure off too, right? It's like, I don't know what I wanna do next, especially for folks who are like, "I need a bit more time to figure out what I want to do because I'm so burned out. My brain really can't think on a functional level anymore. Um, to give yourself that cushion, to give yourself that buffer of and the expansiveness to be like, okay, I'm giving myself permission to take some time. And the way to do that while feeling safe is making sure I have the things I need, how to cover it financially, and having like a few months worth, 3 to 6 months worth there. So just
Mhm.
starting your savings, and it does take some time. Like I remember
Mhm.
to save for my cushion, I needed to start 9 months before I left. Right. So, and it's always helpful to like, even if you don't plan to leave, start saving now. Have a little like
Yeah.
jump fund. So whenever you do find that urge coming up for you or that need to come up for you, you can make that in a way that feels safe and a
Yeah.
lot more quickly as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Another thing that came up with my clients and myself, because it was something that I didn't have planned, was like the feelings around like leaving. And then
Mhm.
once I actually left, so I did set up myself financially. And then once I was there, I'm like, so what am I doing with my life and what's going on? Okay, this is gonna sound funny, but I forgot what made me happy. And
Mm.
so, because I was just going to a grieving phase,
Mm.
I'm just gonna say, okay, another thing. I didn't hear this before, so it's gonna sound funny, but I didn't know you could grieve, like your
Yeah.
past
Mm.
self, your past life,
Mhm.
your past job. And that ended up happening to me where I was just like sad, and all of a sudden I would be crying, and I'm like really
Mm.
questioning this next step.
Yeah.
So when I did feel better, I would write down the things that made me happy. And I just had a list. So when I was going through a period, I'm like, oh, it's day two. And I'm just like, okay, still feeling a certain way about this new transition.
Mhm.
Because if you don't have anybody, I mean, I am fortunate to have people like Betty, and other people that are kind of modeling this life and that it
Mm.
is possible, right? So, but when you don't, it's kind of, you will question the what you're doing. So having a list of the things that you like to do, like your hobbies, things that bring you joy, that was really helpful. So aside from like the money piece, I think that this part of how can I support my feelings, and then that's where therapy happened as well. So
Mhm.
that was my
Absolutely.
non-negotiable of adding that. So that was
Yeah.
really helpful to me.
Absolutely. You just reminded me of something I always ask my clients to budget for whenever they want to consider changing jobs or making any sort of big change in life is budget for the time and space to give yourself a gentle transition, right? Because why are we rushing to make this change happen unless there are actual reasons, like we said earlier? But if those don't exist and those are imaginary urgencies, let's be gentle with ourselves. Let's budget for the time and money to, sorry, time, money, and space to land on the other side so we know where we're going and we feel good about where we're going to.
Yeah.
Mm.
I call that self-care for me, and I feel like, growing up, I wish I was treated with so much, what were the words that you were using? You were using, you didn't use self-care. Gentleness? Did you?
Gentle, being gentle
Yeah,
with ourselves.
gentleness.
Yeah.
And I really didn't have that growing up, so now, oh my god, I'm getting goosebumps. Because I really do create a safe, because I didn't have that space
Yeah.
where I could just like be in quiet, because I felt like I would be
Mm.
called. It's like, Orlando, do something. And that's how I used to talk to myself. I'm working on it. But it's
Hmm.
like, Orlando, do something. It's like, no. Like now, even as uncomfortable as it feels, I don't want to do something. I just want to sit in this patio and listen to the birds chirping. So,
Mhm.
if we think about creating a savings for 3 months, because, okay, I'm going to quit this day and then I have 3 months to find a job. But how could we go back to what Betty's saying of how could we create this of just being how could we be like more gentle and kind of slow it down? And I love how
Mhm.
we keep emphasizing on that because I didn't hear this at all and it was difficult.
Yeah.
And it took me 6 months to be able to be in a rhythm in my business and be
Mhm.
creative again because I was going through so many emotions. So when you're
Mhm.
thinking about your next step, your next career, your next project, whatever that is, that buffer of gentleness to yourself. And
Yeah.
even if you weren't given that, you can create that type of lifestyle, that feeling that you
Mhm.
urge to have. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. The narrative that we hear all the time or the pressure we feel is like, if you do leave your job, say you do all that work to get to that point, well, you better hurry the heck up and find another one, right? Because we're always afraid of that gap in our resume. What would people think? But that's all noise at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Because I'm going to go a little morbid for a minute, but at the end of your life, if you look back, that's not the opinion that's gonna really matter to
Mhm.
you. It's the memories of, "I took that space for myself. I valued myself enough to say that I deserve that." And I
Yeah.
went for it. I didn't wait until 65, 67, whatever the retirement age is nowadays.
They keep moving it because we are living a little more, and especially as
Mhm.
women, we live longer, so how could we
Yes.
create
Yeah.
how could we create that? That's what I really admire about your journey because you were really, like, looking inward to say, "Okay, what are the things that are just not in alignment anymore, but I
Mhm.
wanna create?"
Yeah.
And I have
Yeah.
a question. Did it come from, like, I'm not in alignment anymore? Or was there like a person that you saw? Or was it absent? Like you never
Mm.
saw anybody and like where did the courage come from? I always like to ask that because sometimes we
Oh,
feel like we lack the courage to do
yeah.
something that we've never seen before. But
Mm.
sometimes we have done things in the past that felt hard. And
Mhm.
sometimes this feels hard. So,
Mhm.
has there been like a connection or you saw someone, anything?
Yeah. I did not have any models. I'm the first person in my close circle of family and friends to like make that leap and become an entrepreneur. Not to say like there's no other entrepreneurs out there, but not in my
Yeah.
immediate circles. And I was laughing when you were asking the question because I was like, oh, the thing that really gave me the courage was just being tired as fuck. I was like, I am so over this. I was hitting a point where things were just getting so frustrating that I started becoming frustrated at myself for staying, for dealing with it, for putting up with it. And I was just like, gosh, Betty, like, no more. Like, please just give yourself a different way. And kind of to your point of like the grieving that we don't expect for our past lives, I didn't realize how much forgiveness I had to give to myself in order to make that change because a lot of why I stayed was also me, my need to be consistent, my need to complete things, my need to be responsible. And I realized that, like, I am still all those things even if I leave. In fact, I'm thinking about it responsibly by saving up finances, by considering what joys and how I want to build my business, and just getting really clear that like even in today like the business I build is around authenticity, but behind that is autonomy. That was my driving force to find that courage of like, Betty, you said you wanted this, are you ready for it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
I'll also admit I didn't do it myself. I probably couldn't have done it myself, right? The 9 months leading up to that change, I had to do a really hard look at my own thoughts and like excuses and fears and like just have someone hold that space for me. I kept wanting to run away from all those feelings and thoughts and someone to like gently invite me back. And that was my coach who helped me did that.
Yeah, oh, so good. See,
Mhm.
I didn't know about coaches, until, like, 2020,
Mhm.
and then it started kind of opening the idea of, like, "Oh, there's more out there," which is, like, the reason why we are here today, to kind of, like, spark that curiosity, right, in
Mhm.
whatever way you wanna do it, and like Betty said, there's no one way right or wrong way to do it. It's just like sparking that curiosity of what is important to you. But similarly to you, I had always wanted to start a business, and there was always like excuses, and I was just tired of all of them and waiting
Mhm.
for the right moment. And it's like, you know what?
Oh,
I'm just going to go and do it imperfectly. And
yeah.
sometimes you don't need to have all the answers, and just like being okay with learning from the mistakes
Mhm.
and start planning for something that you really want.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So thank you
and
for
that's a
sharing that, Betty.
yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
asking.
yeah,
Yeah. And I know we're almost at time, so I hope
yeah.
folks who listened in, like, you got something that maybe you didn't expect as you were thinking about what does it mean? What does it look like for you or someone you care about in your life that's about to go through a big change, like changing the career
Mhm.
in their job as well?
Yeah.
It goes beyond finances. Yes, there are costs, but there are also wonderful things that can be gained from the experience as well. So take that time, come up with your non-negotiables, daydream a little about what your fun why is, and reach out for support from a coach, from therapists, from close friends, from family, the trusted people in your life who can give you that time and space, encourage you to take that time to slow down for yourself before you take the leap.
Yes, so important.
Mhm.
So good. I loved this entire conversation because I think back of when I wanted to do things differently, I would have benefited from this conversation and just like knowing that it's possible. So I
Mm.
want you to know
Yeah.
that it is possible, and I want you to um, have at the forefront of like what you want. Like Betty mentioned, daydreaming is free. So don't make the finances be like, oh, this is my current situation. It's not possible for me. But just dream, and then everything falls into place. Like you will make that happen when you know where you are heading.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And if you find that like you're in like a stop and go position, like I want to do this, I'm not sure, or you just have questions and want to reach out, Orlando, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yeah. I am at Pero I Can Do It Too on
Love that.
Instagram. My website is peroicandoit2.com. I'm unsure if you're going to link it down below.
We will. Mhm.
Okay, we'll link the website down below, and my socials are there. My DMs are always open if you want to reach out.
Yes, definitely. And Testament, follow Orlando on Instagram. Her stories are really fun. It goes well beyond just financial tips. And just also like how do we live a richer, fuller life beyond what money represents for us? And as for me, if you found me, you're on my channel. Welcome back. If you're not, definitely follow for any new talks that we're going to be doing. These can be rewatched on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. But if you have a question on like how do I follow and create more authenticity in my life, even in the choice of how do I leave my job, because that's where authenticity shows up. It's in our everyday choices as well. Feel free to reach out and find me on heybettychan.com. All right.
Love that.
So, really appreciate everyone joining us today. Appreciate having you with me, Orlinda. It's always wonderful to find people who share the same values and have these conversations with. That's what continues to give me the courage to go forward.
Love that. Thank you all for joining. And if you have any questions or comments, like Betty was mentioning, leave them down below. We would love to hear them, and I'm sure it's going to help someone else. I'm excited for your next steps and just kind of like planting that seed of curiosity of what is possible for you. So I'm excited
Yes.
for you.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.